Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the question of whether or not schools today are really giving kids the skills that they need in order to be prepared for life after school, or whether it's just more about following directions and being able to figure out how to answer questions on the test. So I bring this up because the other day I was scrolling through social media and one particular person that I follow had posted some kind of a quote about schools just being think tanks that brainwash kids into being little robots or something like that. And whenever I hear things like that, and whenever I hear anybody complain about the school systems as a whole, I always think about the source and whether or not that person actually, number one, has had a kid in school before, has had any experience with the school systems on any level, whether it be the public schools, private schools, homeschooling, whatever, whether or not they have some experience with education and how the system works. And again, do they know any teachers? Do they understand what it's like to be one of those people who is actually in the trenches trying to figure out how to prepare young people to be functioning adults? So obviously, if they haven't had a lot of experience with any of those things, I might not weigh their opinion as much as other people who do have some context. So, with that all being said, I did spend 14 years working for the public schools. As a child, I actually went to a private school up until eighth grade, and then I went to a public school for high school. And during the time that I was in the school systems, even though I worked for the public schools, I had the opportunity to work with parents who had other different situations, whether they were had their kids going to private school and they were getting some services through the public school, or maybe they were homeschooling their kids. And then I've also provided some services for kids who are homeschooled or had a bunch of different options as far as what decision they made as far as the particular setup for their kids' education. And so here's what I know is number one, regardless of who is the one teaching the kids, whether it's public school teachers, whether it's private school teachers, whether it's the parents, the majority of the people that are doing it are are doing their best and are working really hard to figure out how to help kids. So whether it be teachers, and I know that the public school systems aren't perfect, but there are a lot of things that they are doing right. And you could say that for the other situations as well. But the thing that I've noticed is that whether you put your kids in a public school or a private school, or you homeschool, or you do what's known as unschooling, regardless of what situation you choose for your kids, it's not necessarily about what particular setup you choose, because I have seen in all kinds of different setups, I've seen kids who are super successful. I have seen kids who are in all of those a bunch of those different situations that I've mentioned who have not done well. And so the difference is less about what particular situation they are in and more about whether or not whoever is educating them is teaching a particular set of skills that's required in order for them to be successful. So it's less about the setting and the what and the how, and more of or actually it's less about the where and the how, and it's more about the skills that they're actually focusing on. So kids who tend to be successful regardless of the setting they're in are kids who have well developed executive functioning skills. These are the skills that enable us to engage in problem solving, figure out how to complete complex tasks, figure out how to sustain attention, and and again, engage in activities that require sustained effort, problem solving, and self monitoring. I have seen kids who really thrive on the structure of traditional schools do really well. And that particular setting, based on their personality, based on the situation that that family has, as long as they were able to foster those executive functioning skills both in school and out of school, those kids end up pretty successful. Whereas if there are kids who are maybe in another setting and they or actually let me go back to the school situation. So there are some kids who have a hard time with a lot of structure and they need a little bit more autonomy. And in those cases, sometimes traditional school can be a little bit more difficult for them. But whether or not they succeed or whether or not they struggle, a lot of times it's more about their ability to build those executive functioning skills while in that setting, because those are the skills that enable kids to actually stick with tasks and work through things and actually work on those other skills, like specific academic skills or specific skills that have to do with a vocation that they're preparing for after school. Same thing applies to any other setting. Let's say that you have a student who is educated in their home. Well, if they're not doing much and they're not required to problem solve and participate in tasks that require them to be independent and challenge them, then they're not going to be very successful. But if whoever is responsible for educating them is making sure those things happen, then they're going to be successful. So it's less about which decision you choose and more about finding the one that is right for you and your family, and also making sure that you are building executive functioning skills and providing those opportunities to build those skills in whatever setting you choose. Because as far as whether or not the schools are working on those skills, it does depend on the school, but you as the parent can have a big impact on your child's ability to build those executive functioning skills. A lot of times, if you are, let's say you are putting your child in a traditional school, but you're making a concerted effort to work on executive functioning in the home, then that can layer on to whoever is providing that direct academic instruction. So if you're providing that support, it's much more likely that your child is going to be successful in whatever setting that they are in. And obviously, it's always best if you're working as a team with whoever that person is that is providing those direct instruction to your child. So again, less about whether or not schools are doing it right and which setting is the right setting for a child, and more about, are they getting opportunities to build those independent skills, to self-monitor, learn how to self-regulate, and to build those executive functioning skills. Now, if you're not exactly sure what executive functioning is, I have given a pretty detailed description in the description above this video. So, for example, somebody who struggles with executive functioning skills might need a lot of repetitions for directions, might need to have a lot of hand holding while they're doing tasks that require sustained effort and attention. They might get easily distracted. They might be the people who tend to run late or lose things or turn in assignments late or maybe make careless mistakes or on the surface appear like they're not very motivated. While on the contrary, somebody who has strong executive functioning skills is more likely to pay attention to details, do careful work of good quality and show a good effort, and be able to sustain focus for longer periods of time, be able to problem solve on the fly and kind of go with the flow and figure out alternative ways of doing things if they realize the direction they're going isn't working, and also work through things in a reasonable amount of time so that they're being efficient and really end up being the people who are higher achieving in that particular task that they're working on. So again, if you have a child who maybe is not necessarily, you know that they're smart, but it's not necessarily showing up in their grades or in the way that they're functioning, it could be because they just haven't developed their executive functions yet. But the good thing is that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not motivated or not intelligent. It might just mean that they need to develop these skills, which you can absolutely do if you understand what they are. So I have a free guide that walks through those 8 executive functions that can help to build those independent, self-sufficient skills. You can click on the link in the description of this video and grab that guide and learn what those executive functioning skills are so you can start building them in your children today.